Right, so I hope with us sitting, you guys can still see us. I think we're high enough. So I'm excited about this. I called Joel when kind of some of the stuff was going down. We knew this. We were going to have the series, and unfortunately, we're not a very diverse church, and I hope that changes in time. So I asked Joel to bring some guys from his team so we could talk about some of the issues going on in America today. I know that I experienced them quite different than I have in the past. Saying that I just sent in our application to be foster parents to adopt, and we are open to whoever God brings in our home, whatever race the child is. We're just saying we want this child to be in our home, and so I started to look at everything happening in America through the lens of potentially having a black son or daughter, and I've grown up in some diverse places in Detroit and Philly, so it's always been a part of who I am, but I just looked at it with a different lens than maybe I have in the past. So I wanted to have this discussion. I think it's really important with what's going on today. So first off, before we start, why don't we do introductions? And so Dave, why don't you share about your role at Urban Transformation Ministries, and then we'll just pass it down the line here.
Morning. Like Pastor Phil said, I'm Dave-O. I serve as the program director at Urban Transformation Ministries with Joe. I'm also a graduate of the Man Up program, which is a program that UTM holds every, but yeah, so that's who I am. I got a wife. I actually got married at North Park Church, so this is kind of, so. And we held our rehearsal dinner here at the pavilion and stuff, so this is kind of cool to be back. But yeah, so that's my role within UTM, and yeah, I'm just happy to be here today and share my experiences. So thanks for having me.
Hello, I'm Percy. I serve as a worship leader at the Edge Urban Fellowship. I'm part of UTM. I grew up through UTM programs. I was a part of the Man Up program. I serve in UTM whenever they need me. I'm just like, whatever you need, I'm there. But I'm happy to be here and share my experiences with you guys as well. And yeah, I'm just happy to see what God does and excited.
I want to also mention with both Davo and Percy, they're both businessmen. Davo owns 2 or 3 different businesses, doing a lot of different things. You can ask him about it later. And then Percy, he's got his own business. He's a hip-hop artist, rapper, and so he makes money through that way. That's one of the things that he does. So just want to also share that. I'm Joel Schaefer, Director of Urban Transformation Ministries, son-in-law of Pastor Tom and also Connie, and so anyways, you all know me from many years that I've been connected off and on with UTM. Just want to also say thanks with the fatherless offering that was taken on Father's Day, and some of the other money that's come in, is a little over $800 has come in, and that money goes directly towards a lot of our programming, including Davo's salary. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. So, yeah.
All right, so we're just gonna hope that Joel doesn't rap over here.
No, you don't want that.
So I guess I just want to start with the question: how have you personally experienced racism, and maybe in particular, how have you experienced here? Because I think sometimes I've heard people say that racism isn't very prevalent now, but I haven't found that to be true. So how have you experienced racism?
I mean, the question I would like to say is, how haven't I? And so it's been so many different ways just growing up. And then I don't know if anybody's familiar with the term West Michigan nice here in Grand Rapids, but basically it's just saying that it's basically kind of an undertone racism that you hear that we have here in Michigan. And so it's kind of more systematically, it's more of a system of racism that we experience. And so a lot of times my experience comes from police, just being honest. And so, I even got a story I'll share briefly with me and Joe. Me and Joe went up to, I don't know, we went to a lot of places, Muskegon, and we were driving home. We just spoke to a church, and we get pulled over. We in Joe's car, Joe's driving. But they pull me out the car. The cop pulls me out the car, and does this whole, you know, routine or whatever, asks me all these different questions. If I have drugs on me, all these things. I'm just driving in the car. I actually just came back from speaking to a church, you know what I mean, trying to build up the community. And so he was like, yeah, that's cool, you know, whatever. And so he never really addressed Joe or the headlight that Joe had out. He just noticed a black and a white guy driving together and decided to harass me. And so he ended up taking me in on something completely false. I got out, and I mean, Joe, you know, they all came and got me, whatever. But and so I have been extremely hardened towards police, because that's just one of many stories of racism that I experienced. And more recent, even I got a 2-year-old, or 3 now, but at the time he was 2-year-old son. Sometimes I think about even just his life, and now he's already experienced so many, he's experienced little racism. And so I was out to dinner, me and my family, with another family that's we good friends with, probably some of my best friends. And this is a white family, and a lady comes up, and she comes to they got 2 kids and we got our son, and she just come up and she point out the 2 little white kids, and she say, are those 2 your kids? And so my friend's like, yeah, those are my kids. And so the lady goes on and she said, well, I just want to tell you that those 2 kids there, you know, all the 3 of the kids sitting together playing together, but she said, those 2 kids there are very, very well behaved. I've been watching them, and those 2 kids there are very well behaved. And so completely excluded my son. And it wasn't the point. She didn't have to compliment my son, but it was the undertone. She was trying to make a point in doing that. And so it was those microaggressions that you start to catch on, which is different forms of little shady racism that we have experienced. And so in that situation, I was extremely hot, but I didn't want to look like the angry black guy and expressing myself in a public place. And so I prayed it out, and I talked to, although I was very angry, but the way that I would have decided to handle it, just because of natural emotion, I decided not to, and I left it in God's hand. But I just think about that, like, my son has to grow up in this, and so I have to be a voice right now. I got 3 daughters as well, and so I have to speak up for not only myself, but I'm seeing this, you know, it's still there, it's very prevalent. So.
Well, one of my experiences came at one of the hardest times, a very traumatic time. It was the day that I had a house fire. I had cracked my ribs on the roof. I mean, not on the roof, but a fence. And I had went to the hospital. They checked me out and all that. And then I come back, and everyone's at the fire site outside of our home. And I see Joel, and I see Dave, and another one of our friends, Jerry. And at that time, I needed some minutes on my phone. Remember when we used to go to the store and buy minutes? That time. And so I'm walking to the store with Joel and just explaining everything that happened, you know, in an orderly fashion. And then we get this police guy who just comes and just started, hey, this your little druggie, talking about Joe, and he's saying that I'm selling him drugs. That's the only reason why Joe was with me, when actually he was helping me so that I can be in contact with him to let him know what my family needed at this time. And it's just, and that's just one of my experiences. And it's just like, man, like why was that needed? Like, you clearly see me, I got bandages on me, you know, and I'm all busted up, crying and stuff, and not knowing what to do. And he just comes and he just stops in the middle of the road and starts saying those harsh things to me and Joe, like, and just insulting us, you know. And yeah, that's another reason why you don't hang out with Joe. Davo goes to jail, you get racially profiled. Let's just keep it here.
Yeah, I'm being also profiled as the middle-aged white man, drug fiend. So it was kind of funny, you know, that. But it was sad in that sense, because they couldn't see why would a 50-year-old white man or actually I was 40 some then 40. Yeah, I was 40. I was 40 years old. But why would a middle-aged white man hang out with two black men? And the only reason that they thought it was is to sell them drugs. So that here they're profiling them a lot harsher than me.
All right, so right now on social media, race has become a really hot button topic, and I think what's happened is a lot of times we talk past each other. There's no nuance in the conversation, and so when in our culture, when we hear the phrase "Black Lives Matter," what does that statement "Black Lives Matter" to you? In a moment, we'll talk about the organization and those different things, but what does the statement "Black Lives Matter" mean to you?
It means exactly what it says. It's very simple. It's my life matters. You know what I mean? And so I think that, especially as Christians, that we shouldn't judge people off the color of their skin, right? Like, this is such a false narrative that people have held to for so long. And I'm like, we have to get away from that. We have to start seeing people for who they are. You know what I mean? And so Black Lives Matter to me it means exactly that. It doesn't mean that no one else's lives matter, but it just means that, hey, in this moment, my life matters, right? Everything that we've seen that the media portrays and puts out there of black people is not true. And also, yeah, I don't know. I can go on a whole tangent about this, but yeah.
I'm going to add a follow-up. Emotionally, how do you experience the phrase "all lives matter" when someone responds? When someone says "Black Lives Matter" and someone else yells, "That's racist, all lives matter," how do you emotionally respond? Like, what are your emotions when you hear that?
My emotions are, first, it's a complete slap in the face and disregard for everything that is current and going on now with me. And then my emotion is just really angers me to hear that, because it's saying, so I mean, if you think of a child, right, you got children, you got multiple children, and you know, little Sue, she fall down, hurt her leg, right? But I mean, your other son is over here, but he perfectly fine. He needs you all the time. He needs you. But at the moment, she's hurting. She's in pain. She needs you a little bit more. And I feel like that's kind of, with Black Lives Matter, that's the same kind of way we have to look at it right now as brothers and sisters in Christ. We saying, help, we being killed. We being killed, right? And so, and we being treated unfairly. And so it's not, I heard the victim mentality and stuff like that before, you know, and it's not that. It's not saying that. If you get to know people and where they at, you will see most people really want to do well for themselves. Environment has created so much chaos and division that people put up these fake blinders that have us seeing each other in a very negative perspective at times. And so I just feel like, yeah, when I say my life matters, have a conversation. Let's say, all right, well, what does that mean? How do we help? How do we become allies? How do we, you know what I mean? But to say, well, all lives matter, well, yeah, they do. But this house is on fire right now. The firefighter is not gonna go put out the house. You know, you say, oh, well, my house matters. Well, yeah, but we're addressing this fire right now. You know what I mean? And so I feel like that's what we need to tend to. And then if the tables were to turn or in any direction, as brothers and sisters, we all need to come together, you know what I mean, and be unified and not divided. So
yeah, it's kind of horrible to even have to have this a thing. If Black Lives Matter, like, matters, you know what I'm saying? Like, it should matter, you know, it's life that God had granted, you know, God created this life. And then also to just answer the following question, is when people say all lives matter to the sentiment of saying Black Lives Matter, it's kind of like saying on 9/11 all buildings matter. Like, that would be a huge disrespect to the mass of America, right? Like, people would take extreme offense to that. That's how much it hurts, because it's like, yeah, those are buildings, and I'm sorry for the people who died and who experienced trauma through this, but we're here right now and saying the same thing. We need the same type of people on board, like loving is like extreme, like this is wrong. You know what I'm saying? Like that same kind of energy that people give to 9/11, never forget. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, our lives matters just as much as anybody else's. Help us fight opposition. Help us fight evil, because that's really what it is. It's just pure evil.
Yeah, and I think too. I think what happens is these things don't have nuance, and then people get in arguments. And I think if I was living in World War II Germany and I was a Christian and I would say Jewish lives matter, I don't think anybody would say, well, don't do that, because you would need to, as a Christian, affirm a statement. Black lives matter is a theological statement. It means those people that are black, they matter. And when Jesus was on this earth, by his actions, by his stories, he said things like Samaritan lives matter. When he told the story of the Samaritan man, and when he went and talked to the woman at the well who was a Samaritan, and breaking down cultural biases. So I think we need to be careful as Christians to respond in anger to something that we might not fully understand. Now, with that said, the Black Lives Matter movement or organization is a different beast, and Joel, we talked about this. So can you speak just a little bit about the organization itself, and then distinguish that from the statement, which is a theologically true statement?
Well, I think with Black Lives Matter organization, there's so much, the slogan is so tied in with the organization, and the organization was a well-meaning organization that but it was very secular in how it's in its makeup and in different things, but they had good intentions, but really a lot of the wrong goals in that. And so I think we got to be careful in really tying that together, because there's only 13 chapters of Black Lives Matter of the organization. Do you know how many protests there were in the cities? 500, over 500. 13 chapters in here. We're giving them like they're giving marching orders to all these people. They're just like, no, Black Lives Matter. They're just, that's the whole point. And so, yeah, there are aspects of the organization where they talk about disrupting the nuclear family. You know, or I mean, if you know. Black folks, I mean, you got to understand, in America, they're the largest percentage of people that believe the Bible is the Word of God. Okay, black folks, 72% believe that the Ten Commandments, that's how we live that provides a moral base. 72%. I mean, the largest percentage. I mean, and so you'd be pretty surprised. That, you know, I mean, for black folks, they're right on board when it comes to, but they're tired of a lot of the things that are going on, and again, we talked about, you know, a couple of things of the examples that we were able to experience. I mean, you know, I'll just one other experience that I saw is a lot of our students were followed, like at Rivertown Crossings Mall, you know, or different places like that, different store owners, and we knew of my white students that, because they knew that the black students were being followed at Rivertown, the white students would go and just clean house and steal a bunch of stuff, because everyone was focused on the black students. They were all following them, the different security and different things, and they were cleaning house. And so all I'm saying is we see one after another from housing to just a lot of different aspects of racism that we do see.
Yeah, and so I just, you know, I think oftentimes when things happen in the culture, what we do is we examine all these different aspects. And so I think some have rightfully examined the official organization and said, well, I don't agree with that particular aspect. But this sociologist, I like what she wrote. She said she actually studies Twitter, because that's even what you do in sociologists nowadays, which is weird. She said, I just became just as aware that most people use the hashtag Black Lives Matter have no connection with the movement proper. The hashtag itself speaks the truth, and people who hold up a sign in a protest proclaiming that truth are not necessarily involved or even aware of the tenets of the movement proper. Conversations surrounding the Black Lives Matter protest should not assume the slogan is owned by the movement, nor should the movement itself try and own all those who use the hashtag or slogan. I also believe that if Christians fail to become involved in promoting the truth behind the slogan, we are lending credence to the Marxist claim that Christianity exists merely to perpetuate the injustices it also seeks to correct. I think many fellow believers would be surprised how many people in my field are disgusted by our faith, not because they believe we hold the outdated ideas about God, but because we failed so many times throughout history to stand up for the oppressed. And so when I just want to encourage you, when someone else on your Facebook feed says Black Lives Matter, to not assume that means that all lives don't matter. There's like Davo said, here's this problem. We're saying we need to address this problem because it exists. And I think it's easy to just say, well, I don't see that problem because I haven't experienced it, so therefore that must not be a problem. And then I want to ask you guys about the idea of systemic or structural racism. I think a lot of times people push back and say, well, that doesn't exist in America today. And I want to read a quote from John Piper. He says, if your mind is Bible saturated, you would consider it absolutely astonishing if structural racism were not pervasive wherever sin is pervasive. In other words, Bible-shaped people should expect to see structural racism almost everywhere in a fallen world. Structural racism is a child of structural pride and a sibling of the fraternal triplets, structural greed, structural fear, and structural lust. My assumption is that Bible-shaped people are going to resonate with the idea that pride, greed, lust, and fear are embedded in social structures and institutions like entertainment, advertising, capitalist business processes, university tenure procedures, the practice of party politics, and more. So what John Piper is saying is, if sin exists, then we should expect to see evidence of sin in the structures that exist. That's just part of the way sin infiltrates everything. So, but in this conversation, what often happens is we have some people saying, well, see, it's in the structures, it's in systems, and other people saying, no, it's just at an individual level. And so since I don't individually know any racists and I'm not individually racist, then therefore the problem doesn't exist in the way other people are describing it. So can you guys speak just a little bit to systemic or structural racism, and do you believe that exists in America, and why do you believe that?
Simply, I got a lot of friends that have never like committed crimes but were accused of committing crimes and didn't have money for lawyers, so they've taken like plea deals, which is insanity because they're actually innocent and they're doing time in jail. Why? They know that a lot of people from where we're from don't have the financial resources, nor do we have connections with people in positions of power that can help defend us. So they take advantage of that while they can make free money off of us doing whatever labor or whatever court costs a family has to pay now is more money coming to the government. It's just the 13th Amendment is still an amendment, and it says that we're legally slaves if we go to jail. And that's still an amendment today. Like, why isn't that abolished? That's a great example right there, if not the strongest example of systematic racism and oppression to a people.
Yeah, and I just think about housing and and all these different things like that, but I've heard examples. I haven't personally experienced this, but I've people within my culture have, and but just simply based off the name on the application, determine whether they got the apartment or not, or if they got the job or not. And so if it didn't, you know what I mean. And so those are examples of systematic racism as well to me. And so I think that everybody should have, right, like we say, like the United States, and like if we together, like let's be together, right, we united. But I feel like it's so much division still there. And so let's have equal playing field. How do we get to a space where we have equal opportunity for everybody and truly mean that, right? Will it ever be? I don't know, but I think the conversations, like the initiative that Pastor Phil had to have these conversations, is what get us a step closer. So
yeah, there. Part of my job, it's kind of changed a little bit. I mean, here our focus is a lot on fatherlessness because that is an issue that we are definitely dealing with. But it does intersect with other types of issues, poverty, but also there is a lot of racial issues and racial injustices that we've seen. For example, with our students, with our black students, they're just more likely to be to go to juvie, whether they're white students, and we've just seen a lot of different things like that. And even though if you look at all the different studies. Whether whites and blacks, they sell drugs at the same level, or even and yet what you'll see with that at the juvenile level that blacks will be prosecuted at double what whites are, and so we see these things like that, and it just gets tiresome, you know, and so it gets tiresome where you have the far left and the far right with their own confirmation bias, trying to use stats to weaponize against each other, to try to prove that their side is wrong, and so, you know, I'd like to be doing a lot more gospel preaching and discipleship, but I spend a lot more of my time having to do research of original sources to show that no, there's issues like this that are going on, and it gets tiresome, you know. Yes, there is systemic racism, and it's at different levels. It's not for example, law enforcement. Chicago's a pretty dirty city. So is Minneapolis, and we see that Grand Rapids isn't nearly where they're at, but they're still at different levels. There's different departments. There's different things that we have to just look at each situation, each city, you know, and in a different way, but it takes it. We can't be lazy in how we go about that. It takes a lot of time and research to try to figure that out. But I'd much rather be again discipling leaders that are discipling the fatherless and really working on that. But I'm being dragged into other things.
Yeah, and the way I've often thought about too is my whiteness has never been a disadvantage. I've never gone into a place and really the only time I ever felt my race was when I went into a bowling alley in Southfield, and I was the only white guy in there, and it was like the record stopped when I walked in. But then that was the most fun I've ever had bowling in my entire life, because we tend to be, as white people, more individualistic, and in my experience at least, with a lot of my black friends, their culture is a little more communal than ours is. So I had a lot more fun than I normally have playing bowling. But so we see those things, and I also ask you to build relationships with people of color, and also to build relationships, like talk to the Stevens, talk to those that have white and black kids, and to talk about the different experiences their white kids had from their black kids, and the different. I have a number of friends that have adopted children of different races, and they just tell the experiences, the difference between what happened when they went to the store with their white children, and they never had to think about it, and all of a sudden things are happening differently now that they have children who are of different ethnicities. I really want. I mean, we're at a church right now, so I want to ask the question: how does the Bible inform our conversations about race? What are some things that the scriptures that help us think through some of these issues?
I'll start off. I want us to look at the book of Acts, okay? And if you look at Acts, what you'll see is the church, and this multilingual church that started off at Pentecost, but it struggled. And you see the gospel go into all the different regions in the Roman Empire, but you also see in Acts chapter 6, Acts chapter 8, Acts chapter 10, Acts chapter 11, Acts chapter 13, Acts chapter, I think it's 15, where it struggled to become multicultural. They're dealing with cultural issues. They're dealing with, because you have these different ethnic groups together, like in Acts chapter 6, you have the, you basically have the Greek-speaking, culturally Hellenist Jewish widows who are being overlooked, and so they made that complaint, and so the apostles, they dealt with it, and they didn't say, hey, stop trying to be the victim here, okay? They didn't say that. They oh no, let's deal with this situation. They're being overlooked. Let's deal with it and move on. But they dealt with it, and they appointed 7 Greek-speaking deacons to really deal with that cultural issue. That was a cultural and what we would consider a racial type issue back in Acts. Look at Acts chapter 8. You have, imagine the scandal of a eunuch, a black eunuch that was introduced to the gospel. That's a hard thing to think about for those who were disciple or who were part of the old covenant, But yet that was a cultural issue that they had to deal with. Of course, Peter in chapter 10, and then Antioch, the church of Antioch, where the gospel was preached, and Acts chapter 13 is unbelievable as you look at it, because Luke, what he does with Acts chapter 13 is you have the 5 leaders that were that they prayed over, the Holy Spirit, and he talks about, Luke talks about their ethnic, their class, even in the racial background of one of the guys, Simon, who's called what? Black. Okay, the Bible brings out his color of his skin. They brought out the class of one of the people that was apostle or was the teacher that was going to be, that possibly could be sent out to mission. They brought out their cultural background, So the Bible's not colorblind here, okay? It's not blind to our ethnic differences. We're all one in Christ, and there's an emphasis on the unity of Christ, but it celebrates our differences as well.
I don't know. I think this is all so simple, and very simply put, this is my perspective, and just to give you a little, I grew up kind of being the kid that kind of hung out with everybody in school. You know what I mean? I hung out with the drug dealers. I hung out with the skater kid. I hung out with the goth kids. I hung out with the, whoever. You know what I mean? The loners. I kind of gelled with everybody, and so part of that I think came from my upbringing. And so my uncle was married to a white woman, and so I spent a lot of time with their family on holidays and stuff like that, and experiences in it. So I got to realize the difference in cultures at an early age, and so it's things that I applied to my life from those times. You know what I mean? And so kind of made me who I am. And so I learned to appreciate differences in culture very early in my life. And so to me, this is all so simple. The word says, "Love thy neighbor." It's very simple. Love thy neighbor. If your brother or sister is, and so at times I've been very upset with the church because I've seen responses to racial injustice or police brutality coming from people who I spent a lot of time with within the church. And so my mindset is just saying, okay, how can you truly believe that? If you believe the word of God, how can you then so say or not be loving to your brother or sister in a manner that shows them that you are standing with them in times of oppression? And so to me, it's very simple. People overthink it, and and like you said, Pastor, we have pride, or like John Piper said, I'm sorry, our pride get involved in sin, and so we need to constantly be combating that and fighting that, and holding and making sure that those around us, we use our influence to impact those around us to be held and hold them accountable in their actions.
And when you said love thy neighbor, then someone said, who's your neighbor? And then Jesus told a story about a different ethnicity who was hated, that people wouldn't even like touch the same stuff they touched, and if they talked to, they would be considered unclean. He says that Samaritan, he was the one that was the neighbor there. So it is a very simple truth. When I look at the scriptures, Genesis 1, God created mankind as his own image. Male and female, he created them. We're all created in God's image. James 3 says, with the tongue we praise our Lord and Father. With it we curse human beings who've been made in God's likeness. So when we're cursing others that are made in God's likeness, the scriptures say, verse 10, out of the same mouth come praise and cursing. My brothers and sisters, that should not be. Romans 3, it talks about total depravity. It says, do we have any advantage? Not at all. We have already been made the charge that Jews and Gentiles alike are all under the power of sin. So they're dealing with, like Joel said, dealing with issues of ethnicity and different cultures. And he's saying all these cultures are under the power of sin. There's no one righteous, not even one. No one who understands. There's no one who seeks God. All have turned away. They all have together become worthless. There's no one who does good, not even one. If we believe in total depravity, like we say we do, that sin permeates human beings, then it makes sense that sins like racism would come to the forefront. Micah 6:8 says, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good and what the Lord requires of you, to do act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with our God. So as people of the word, we need to be about justice. And Isaiah 1 says, learn to do right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, plead the case of the widow. So these themes are all throughout the scriptures. And then we long for the day in Revelation 7 where there's going to be this great multitude of every nation, tribe, people, language standing before the throne of the Lamb. And so we long for this time where there will be no more division and we will all be worshiping. And so with that said, we didn't want to only, I guess, have talk about stuff that's the hard stuff, but where have you seen stories of transformation? Where have you seen walls of racism break down? Where have you seen people reconciled together? What things have you seen happen?
Well, my wife is Caucasian, so I have Caucasian in-laws. One of my brother-in-laws had a perception of black people because of the area he lived in, and his bike had got stolen before, and he just held all black people and like, oh, they're just wrong, whatever. And him meeting me changed that. He even like apologized to me for those thoughts because he had preconceived notions about me, and like one day he just let this all out to me and told me how he was thankful that I could change that for him. And I had never known, and then it's been times at New City Church where just, I'll hug someone and welcome them to church, and that'll be the reason why they stay because of how loving. It's like, I didn't know they were like that kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's because people's perception of us are, if they don't have no relationships, all they know about us or think they know is what they see on TV, and that's just not it.
I'll just say I'm one of the elders at New City Church, and what I've seen in the lives, I mean, what Percy was referring to is with the hugs is, I mean, he hugs everybody. If you know Percy, he's very warm and what's that? It's cool. Yeah, but anyways, one of our drummers at the church was I mean, even God used Percy in his life to just even point him to Christ, and just the reality of different people worshiping together and loving each other from different ethnicities, and it broke down the walls that he had toward black folks. Another person is a guy who's leading worship today. I remember at New City. I remember 5 years ago was like complaining to us that that we favor the black folks in our church too much, and with worship and other different things, and here Davo ends up having, I don't know, you and him would go and watch football together, and little by little, I don't even know if you even had much conversations about racial issues. I mean, but it was just the relationship. He's like, oh my goodness, and so it's very interesting because he's a guy that we're looking at as a deacon. But one of the things is he's changed his whole mindset, where it's more, how can we be a lot more loving towards everybody in the church, especially those who are African American, because they're neglected, kind of like that whole widow. The Greek widows type of thing, and so he's changed his entire mindset. But it started with Davo going and watching Ohio State versus Michigan State football, and Dave was all Michigan State. So, but anyways. Just the relationships. It's the relationships that are forged together, and walking, where people see what people are going through, and having empathy, that leads to a lot of just being okay. What can we do to come alongside and be an ally?
Very well said, Joe. If anything, I would just add emphasis on relationships. It's very important, and even with how the ministry, how UTM is structured, it's all relationship based. Like we press it to all of our volunteers and leaders that come in. We stress the importance of relationships, and so I think that's something that can happen very naturally if we all take the initiative and the time to seek out someone and then get to know them as a person, versus judging them just off the color of their skin or whatever, or if they like Michigan or Ohio State, whatever it may be. Just get to know somebody, and so although you like Michigan, I'm assuming, okay, so someone likes, if Pastor Phil is a Michigan fan, I'm a Michigan State fan, right? Me and Pastor Phil could still have a lot more in common than just that one thing that we divide on, right? And so we can still love each other as brothers and build and be unified in a lot of different ways if we know one another, right? And so if we take that time to understand someone's history, why they think that way. And so oftentimes I think of, when I'm talking to my white brothers and sisters and we having these conversations, I'm thinking of, okay, because I know you, I know your heart, I know where you're speaking from, I know where you grew up. So I got a little bit better mindset of how to receive what they're expressing. And so, and it may not be even they're intentionally trying to be or lack empathy or anything. They haven't had those same experiences. And so you have to paint the pictures for them. And that's any culture. You have to paint the picture for them in order for them to have any kind of idea of what that experience was for someone, or what that was like. And so now they might be able to relate a little bit more, or at minimum just have the empathy or be extremely empathetic towards, okay, that's real, and I want to walk alongside with you. So
and I think empathy is so important, to actually listen to people. I think that James passage, I think we're usually quick to speak, slow to listen, and quick to become angry, especially if you're on social media. And so when I've actually taken a break from Facebook because I was just too disheartened. So I haven't been on Facebook other than for my job, the stuff I have to do, because I've just been disheartened by the posture of Christians, not so much the words, but the posture that they've had. And so I've been reading this book, Divided by Faith, Evangelical Religion and the Problem of Race in America. It's been really interesting that he traces back from way back to the time of slavery and how the evangelical church has responded to race, and where even some of the emotions have come. And he showed how evangelicals typically look at the issue, and it's been really interesting. But I've been aware of, I feel like I've been aware of racism my whole life. I grew up in a kind of diverse place, and my parents were missionaries, so I was traveling all over the world. But I even remember when the first black family moved into our short little neighborhood. I went to a school that was more diverse than our neighborhood, and neighbors were worried because the prices of the house, the values of the house were going to go down. And that's like we talk about, well, systemic racism, structural racism doesn't exist, but then here you have one black family move into a neighborhood and everybody's worried because that means that when someone comes to look for a house, they'll see a black family and they won't want to pay as much for a house. And this is in the early 90s, late 80s. This is not long ago. I'm 38. So these are things that exist. And so I think it can be often we have our own perception of what exists, and so then when someone challenges our perspective, then we immediately have an emotional response to fight back against that rather than a response to listen. So I'd recommend that book. And then I'll actually, I've been acquiring some resources to pass on to the church for you guys to listen to and read. But I also want to ask the question to all these guys: what do we do? What are some practical steps we can take to bring about reconciliation? I ordered that book that you told me about last week, Joel, and I've been watching some George Yancey videos, and so I'm excited to engage in that. But maybe there's a resource, or just what are things that we can do? The hard part. The series is called "What Do We Do?" because there's these big issues that exist out there that are just like no one person can tackle, but we can all do something practical. So what are some things we might be able to do to help in this issue?
Like I said, I mean, as a resource, it's a couple books that I would recommend. It's a book called How to Be an Anti-Racist that he's pretty well-rounded. I don't think the guy's a Christian, but his perspective on race and how we move as one unified is pretty good perspective. And then I think, simply said, I mean, just relationships, like build relationships with people, and take the time to see a person for who God, like, we are created in God's image, right? Like, ultimately saying, you're not going to walk with these, like, it's kind of like a slap in the face to the image of God, right? Like, you got disregard for the image of God, right? Like, so we have to hold that, and we have to walk firm with that. And so build relationships, be open to conversations, like Pastor Phil said, be slow to speak, open your ears, turn them on to upper level, and have these meaningful conversations. And I'm gonna just be real, it's gonna be uncomfortable, you know what I mean? You just got to be willing to go into uncomfortable spaces and have these conversations in order for us to have any progression. And so be bold in the faith, stand, be fearless, but be compassionate and empathetic at the same time, and make sure that you holding those around you accountable, you know what I mean? And so and remove all the politics stuff, like all the and so I'll just say that, and I'll leave it there. So
not any much more to say other than just build relationships, love thy neighbor, you know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, what's wrong is wrong. Don't be silent, A lot of the times the disenfranchised voices are silent, and often I feel like we're like that nagging little gnat at the barbecues, like, just get away when we say, like, yo, we need your help. And it's like you kind of like just shooing us off, not you necessarily, but just people, period. And silence is never the key, man. Silence gets nothing done. Silence is actually very offensive. It makes you feel voiceless. It makes you feel like, I guess this is just the way it is when you got people who are not saying anything about travesties, what's wrong, you know, and to be Christian and to be silent about senseless, harmful crimes that are happening across this nation, and just it's not like bothering me directly, so I mean I don't even know those people, so what to say? It's just wrong, and you have to stand up for what's right. Silence is never the key, like never. So silence can't be an option if you are choosing to be loving to your neighbor and having those relationships, if you're open to building those and just getting outside of your comfort zone. A part of loving somebody is speaking up when they're wrong, or if they're defenseless, you step in and like you help aid them, you know. You can't be silent. Like, if you're going to be here, you have to be here like all the way, 100% all in. You can't halfway love anyone. You have to be 100% all in, and that's really the key, you know. God said don't have no other idols before him, and then he goes to say about his commandments, the greatest of these are love. So love endures all the laws. That's in Romans somewhere, I'm paraphrasing. But like, it's just love. It's that simple, man. Show love. You know what I mean? Like, it's just love. Let's love people, love what God created, be communal, and man, like, things will change. Things can change through that, you know, and we have to put our best foot forward as a people and cut out all the noise, the preconceived notions and stuff, you know, because that's so divisive, you know. Just come in expecting nothing but on your end, just to show love and to be accepting and to, you know, endure what this person has, and you see where it goes, you know. That's really it.
And I just like this, and then just this is such thing as a righteous anger, right? Like, you could be angry that your brothers and sisters being oppressed, but like, I think black people have like a righteous anger, like I'm angry all the time, right? Because in reality, it's exhausting to be black, like in this country. Like, I'm exhausted leaving my house. My preparation for leaving the house, I can never leave the house and just my mind be settled in a place of peace. When I leave the house, I'm at high tension all the time. I got to worry about, you know, police. I got to worry about the guy walking down my street with, you know, all this racist, you know, gear on. Like, I got to, you know, like, I'm worried about my life at every moment of every day. And so even walking into a store, you know what I mean? And so it's high tension. And so a lot of times when you see people reacting in like these harsh ways, it's trying to get attention. It's not like we out here, you know, you see people, and I'm not with all the looting and all that, you know, crazy stuff. Protests, I'm all for it. It's a difference. And people have to know the difference between protesting and rioting and all looting and all this stuff, right? And so, but when people are expressing themselves, they have the right to be angry if they were wrong, right? Like, they have a righteous anger. And so I think a lot of time people, we just saying, like, look at us, right? Like, you see kids, I worked in schools for a long time, you see kids acting out, and it's just because they completely been neglected and not seen or not heard at home, right? And so they doing whatever they need to do to get attention. Look at me, look at me, look at me. And so I think that's kind of where we are as a people, is just saying, look, I'm tired. Why do I have to scream and cry? So much blood has been shed. Like, when will you link arms and walk with me? Like, let's stand together. It's not, you know what I mean? And so I don't know. Anyway, that's my 2 cents.
So for me is along with the active listening that I talked about, but really having the posture of learning, and learning from those that you may disagree with or whatever, and seeing what you can learn from them, and so anyways, and with that listening and learning, make sure that you're in learning that you're not being discipled by the media. Okay, you're discipled by the church. Okay, you're not being discipled by Candace Owens or Don Lemon from either the right or the left. You're being discipled about the church when it comes to race, to racial type of issues. Okay, there's way too much where we have secular non-Christians saying a bunch of stuff that we don't have that commonality, that that people are looking at that first, instead of saying, man, we're going to learn from our godly leaders when they talk about these different things. The polarized political stuff that's going on, you're not going to learn about race through that. Okay, Don Lemon on the left, or Tucker Carlson on the right, they're not going to teach you about racial issues. Okay, it's the body of Christ right here. People that are black, white Christians, we can really learn from each other and disciple each other through that. And I remember there's he's passed a long time ago, a guy by the name of Tom Skinner. He was an evangelist in the 60s and 70s, a black evangelist. But he used to say that racial reconciliation was like two Christians performing surgery on each other, okay, for the glory of God. And there's some uncomfortable stuff that comes out of that we shouldn't ignore, and we need, and we're not trying to shut down people's conversations. There's too much of that out there, too much political crap. Too much political correctness. I'm so sorry, but we can't, where we can't even talk through these different things, and so we can't look for secular solutions. And we can't look at, and we look at that comes from both the left and the right, from both sides. They both have secular solutions. We have the gospel that unifies us, that makes us righteous before God. And I mean, it's the gospel that does that, okay? And yet we're relying on our own self-righteousness that we get from listening to different politics. So really, that's my challenge. Is there's a lot of different books out there. John Perkins's One Blood is you got to listen. You got to read John Perkins, who as in the 1970s was tortured by white racist police officers in Mississippi, and from that coined the phrase racial reconciliation, that the gospel needed to be bigger enough that would not only reconcile us to God, but reconcile us to each other. He saw the hate that caused these whites to shove a fork up his nose, beat him until till all this blood came out of him, and yet his response was love. And it was love. It was the love of Christ that he saw that it wasn't just black people. It was white. Everyone was affected in such a negative way by racism. Read John Perkins. Watch those YouTube videos on him. You'll start crying. You're like, wow, what people have gone through, but also what the love and forgiveness and even in that situation, it was white doctors that took care of him and loved him and showed where he wanted to hate white people, but he couldn't, because you have these white Christian doctors that were loving and taking care of him. And there's some amazing stories of what God has done. George Yancey's book Beyond Racial Gridlock is really good. There's a book by a guy by the name of D.A. Horton called Ethnic Kingdoms. I don't know. kingdom ethnicity or something. It's something along those lines. There's some really good people that are speaking the truth, and they're not cultural Marxism from the left, nor are they the political stuff from the right. That the nationalism from the right, but just biblical theology practiced out, and can really help us and disciple us, and so that's my challenge to all the things that that Percy and Davo and Pastor Phil has said.
Yeah, and Percy said, "Don't be silent," but some of us need to shut up and listen. I mean, just being honest, silence. I know we need to speak out, but before you speak out, we need to listen first, because it's just disheartening. It's disheartening, and so how can we come alongside those that need people to come alongside them? I want to end with Ephesians 2. For he himself is our peace, who has made two groups one, and has destroyed the barrier, the dividing wall of hostility, by setting aside in his flesh the law with its commands and regulations. His purpose was to create in himself one new humanity out of the two, thus making peace, and in one body to reconcile both of them to God through the cross, by which he put to death their hostility. He came and preached peace to you who are far away, and peace to those of you who are near. For through him we both have access to the Father by one Spirit. And so in the early church, between Gentiles and Jews, there was great division. And I think a lot of times we have different divisions. So listen. One of the reasons we send our kids to the school that they go to, even though it's further away, is there's people from 30 different countries, and my kids' best friends are all different ethnicities from different countries and different races. And so we're just seeking to be people that engage in this. And I want to be a person that engages. I want to be a person that listens and learns. And I just pray that we're a church that listens and learns. And so I thank these guys for coming out today. I really appreciate you guys coming, and thank you. And I pray this will be one more step towards reconciliation and continuing to be a part of this conversation and helping it move forward. So I appreciate you guys, and just want to say thank you for coming. And everyone wants to give them a round of applause.